Okay, what I have kind of put in your classroom is a document called Checklist for Histology. We are going to start the first chapter studying the tissue types of the body. So you have a list of tissues that you need to know what they look like under a microscope. Won't be able to use microscopes, but you need to know what they look like at a microscopic view. And we'll work through those pictures. You'll know exactly what they look like and what you should do. So the list is here. These are all the tissue types you're responsible for. And after the lecture, you'll have some content to start building your slideshow. And always feel free to kind of move ahead with the process. So the slide needs to have a title. So if we're starting with slide number 1, the title of that slide is going to be simple squamous. And then you need to insert a picture. In the directions right here, I basically tell you to kind of use a word when you do your search. And you need to use the word histology. So when you type in simple squamous, you want to make sure you type in simple squamous histology or histology simple squamous. That will get you to images that are microscopic and actual photos of real live tissue under the microscope. If you were to type in something like bone, you're going to get a lot of cartoon images of a dog bone. That's something that we don't want. We want actual pictures, and the picture needs to not have any text on it. You can have symbols or it could have arrows pointing to the tissue type, but it can't have the name of the tissue type on it. The second page of the checklist gives you an exemplar. So a slide would have the title, simple squamous, and then it would have a photo. This arrow is showing you where simple squamous is on this particular photo. And then you're going to have function locations. You are responsible for the functions in one location. So in the slideshow, I'm going to give you a number of different examples of locations. You're just responsible for one. You are responsible for all the functions. So again, you might not have the information to fill in yet, but you can at least type in function and location on your slides and fill it in later on. Again, don't use any, when you go for pictures, make sure they're not drawings or cartoon-like illustrations. You want to make sure they're actual images of the tissue type. This one has all the answers on it, tissue type on it. Again, you don't want to do that. You just want a blank photo of the tissue type. So that's what you're going to be working on as you get more and more information. It's kind of a study guide, kind of the lab for this particular chapter. Okay, so now we're going to go through the first category of tissues, the epithelial tissue. So you don't have to write this down. You're not responsible for these bullet points. But a cell is basically a type of life form that has a certain function. And most cells, actually all cells in the body, do certain things. And when they do certain things, they're grouped with other cells that do similar things. The groupings of cells that do similar jobs are called tissues. There are 4 primary tissue types that we're going to cover: epithelial tissue, connective tissue, nervous tissue, and muscle tissue. We're just going to do 3 for this particular chapter. Nervous tissue we'll deal with once we tackle that particular system. The 5 characteristics of epithelial tissue. So this is a question on the test. What are the 5 characteristics of epithelial tissue? And you need to write these down. So now you want to start taking notes. This particular information is something that you need to know and be able to answer on a test. The first characteristic of epithelial tissue is that it fits closely together. So it forms sheets of cells. The membranes always have one free surface. And what that means is that one side of the cell is always exposed to open space. That open space can be the outside world, or it can be an actual opening in your body. So your mouth, your nose, your ears, those are all lined with epithelial tissue because they are exposed to the outside world. Your skin is exposed to the outside world. But within your body, you have tubes. So we take an artery, for example. An artery has an opening, and blood travels through that opening. That opening is lined with epithelial tissue. You have glands in your body that produce sweat, they produce hormones, and when they produce a product, that product travels through a tube, and that tube, again, is lined with epithelial tissue. We're going to have some variations in the actual outside of the cell. We're going to see microvilli and cilia. Microvilli are finger-like projections, whereas cilia are hair-like projections. The lower surface of the tissue rests on a basement membrane, so it's actually anchored. There's no blood supply. Another word for this is avascular. Avascular tissue types have no direct blood supply. So there's no actual veins or capillaries or arteries traveling through this tissue type. It gets its nutrients because it is very thin and the cells fit closely together in sheets. So they are able to get nutrients via diffusion. So nutrients will diffuse across a blood vessel into this tissue type, and then any waste that's produced by the cells will diffuse back into the bloodstream to get eliminated. This particular tissue type regenerates very easily and grows back, no problems whatsoever. Other tissue types like nerve tissue or muscle tissue, once damage is done, it's usually for extended periods of time and or forever. It does not grow back. This is just a illustration of cilia, so it's finger-like projections, and they always tend to beat in one direction or move in one direction. Microvilli are extensions of the cell. They're finger-like extensions. Okay, so we can kind of see here's the cell membrane, but it will kind of go up and around like fingers, up and around. What this does is it increases the surface area of the cell. So, for example, your digestive tract is lined with epithelial tissue that has microvilli. What that does is it increases the surface area of your digestive tract. An intestine is about 29 feet long or so. But within that 29 feet, the surface area is the size of a football field. So you're able to fit a very, very large surface area into relatively small space. Okay, so we take a football field and we're able to condense it into a tube that's 29 feet. The same thing kind of happens in your lungs. You have a lot of folds in the cells. And again, that increases the surface area. So your lungs, surface area wise, it's about the size of a tennis court. So you have a tennis court in your chest and a football field in your stomach. And that is all accomplished because the cells will have all these extensions on them to increase their surface area. What does that do? Why is that beneficial? It allows things to happen very, very quickly inside your body. So instead of waiting long periods of time because you don't have the surface area for things to happen, instead you have a lot of area that's exposed to something. And as a result, things happen very, very quickly. We have simple versus stratified epithelial. So these are the two major categories of the tissue type. Simple epithelial means that it's one layer of cells. The name is dictated ultimately by the shape of the cell. We have three shapes. We have squamous, which is flat, cuboidal, which is square or cube-shaped, and columnar, which is column-shaped or rectangular. So simple squamous is a single row of flat cells. Simple cuboidal is a single row of cube-shaped cells. Stratified epithelial is many layers of cells, but the name is dictated by the shape of the cell at the very top. So this particular diagram, you can see there are column-shaped cells, then cube-shaped cells, and then flatter cells. So this would be stratified squamous. If there was a column-shaped cell on top, over and over columns, then it would be stratified columnar. The first tissue type is simple squamous epithelium. The bullet here is just a descriptor of the picture. You are not responsible for that. You are responsible for all the functions in just one location. So again, I'm going to give you a number of different locations. You just have to write down one. In the diagram here, we can see we have open space. Okay, this is a cross-section of a capillary. We see muscle here, open space, blood, remnants present. But then we have these flat cells that are anchored at a basement membrane to the muscle, but then the free surface is exposed to open space. So these are all simple squamous cells. The function is absorption, secretion, and filtration. Because they're so small, things can move past them very, very easily. They're found in alveoli, which are the air sacs in your lungs, capillaries, and the linings of cavities and organs inside your body. The next tissue type is simple cuboidal. So the diagram is showing you tubes, tubules, and glands. So the tube is going in this direction. These tubes are kind of going towards you. And we can see we have a single row of cube-shaped cells. So that's simple cuboidal epithelium. The function is absorption, secretion, and filtration, and it produces mucus. Mucus is a body lubricant that is kind of all over your body in order to allow things to move very easily. Sometimes we associate mucus with that, when you're sick and you're producing a lot of gross, dense mucus that you're eliminating. That isn't what it looks like all the time. It's a very thin, kind of liquidy, slick solution that when you're sick changes its consistency because you're getting rid of debris. But for the most part, it's not like that. The location is the liver, the pancreas. Find it in mammary glands, salivary glands, and kidney tubules. Simple columnar is a single row of column-shaped cells. The function is absorption and secretion. We find this in the GI tract. So your GI tract is completely lined with this particular tissue type. Again, we see microvilli present because that increases the surface area of the cell. And as a result, you're able to absorb nutrients very, very quickly. Pseudostratified epithelial is a tissue type that is not quite simple and not quite stratified. It shows characteristics of both. So this particular cell is a simple cell. This cell is just simple. Again, it's just one cell on a basement membrane exposed to the outside. This cell is on top of another cell. This cell is on top of that one. So those are stratified. So every once in a while, we have some stratification occurring, but not always. So pseudo means not really, almost there, not quite. So this particular tissue type is neither simple nor stratified. The function is absorption and secretion. What it does is it propels your respiratory mucus. So it has cilia on the top of it that always beat up towards your throat. So it's constantly pushing mucus out of the lungs up to the throat so you can swallow it. And then you kill anything that is possibly in there once it hits the stomach. This is found in your respiratory tract. You do not need to write these down. You're not responsible for this information. This is just an overview of stratified epithelium. It's composed of one or more layer of cells. We have one exception, which is transitional. The deepest cells are on a basement membrane, and we're going to see variations. Some are keratinized and some are non-keratinized. Keratin is a protein your body makes to waterproof it and protect it. So your outside layer of your epidermis is completely keratinized. That's why your skin is dry. Your fingernails are made out of keratin. Your hair is made out of keratin. So it's just a protein that's protective, and we're going to find that present in some of these cell types. The first of the stratified category is keratinized stratified squamous. So it's multiple layers of cells, and then we have squamous cells that are keratinized at the very end. Here's a picture. So this is dermis right here. And then the purple are keratinized stratified squamous. So these cells are alive, but as they move farther and farther and farther away from the nutrient supply, they end up dying. Within this area, we have cells called keratinocytes that kind of come around and inject keratin into the cells. So as the cells move farther and farther away from this area, they become highly keratinized and cornified. Cornified is the hardening of the cell. So here we can see this is the outside world over here, and we have this very, very thick layer of basically pure keratin. And that came from the cells here that injected into the dead cells. And as they started to compress on each other, they formed a thick layer of keratin. This is your skin, your epidermis, and the function is protection. This forms the epidermal layer of your skin. For location, you can just write epidermis. You don't have to write that all out. Non-keratinized stratified squamous is basically the same idea, but there's no keratin in the cell. So the cells will grow because they're very close to the nutrient supply, and as they move away, they basically flake off. So this is just a protective layer. So it helps to protect the deeper layers that are below it. That's the function, protection. This is found in areas that get kind of a lot of abuse, which is usually the mouth because of the fact that we're constantly eating and kind of roughing up the tissue there. So this is found in the tongue, the oral mucus, which is the mouth, and then the esophagus. Stratified cuboidal is multiple layers of cube-shaped cells. The function is to protect and secrete sweat. This is found in your sweat glands. Stratified columnar is pretty rare, hence the very unexciting picture. Multiple layers, top layer is column shape. The function of stratified columnar is to protect. This is found in the ducts of large glands. Last one is transitional. And transitional has the ability to stretch and compress. So the actual shape of the cells can change. At rest, they're fully extended, but then when they're basically exposed to any sort of pressure, they will compress, flatten out. So the function is to stretch out to allow filling. We only find this primarily in the urinary tract because we have liquid volume constantly increasing and decreasing. So these are constantly stretching and compressing. This allows the shape of, the places that they're found, your reader, the bladder, the kidneys. So the actual relative shape of the structure doesn't change much, but the inside does. So if you think about a bladder when it's empty, these particular cell types are completely extended. But as the bladder fills, the inside will get bigger and bigger and bigger to allow volume of the liquid to increase. But the actual shape of the bladder doesn't change drastically. The inside shape does. And that's because these cells allow that to happen.